Ukraine will be a member of NATO. It has been clearly articulated at the Vilnius summit. Good afternoon, this is Henry Keane on UATV Daily, wrapping up giving you the hard truth in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. During the NATO summit in Vilnius, Alliance Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg put it straightforwardly: Ukraine will receive an invitation to NATO when all allies agree and the conditions are met, and what is of great importance, further Ukrainian integration into alliance will take place according to a simplified procedure, no map stage.
Putin invaded Ukraine last year. He underestimated the bravery of the Ukrainian people, the courage of the Ukrainian forces, and the determination of the Ukrainian political leadership. But he also underestimated the unity and strength of the NATO alliance. NATO will continue to stand with you for as long as it takes. NATO allies have provided tens of billions of dollars in support over the past year. And now we have agreed a three-part package bringing Ukraine closer to NATO. A multi-year program of practical assistance, establishing a new NATO-Ukraine Council, and reaffirming that Ukraine will become a member of NATO and removing the requirement for the Membership Action Plan. Our new multi-year program of assistance for Ukraine will help you transition from Soviet era to NATO equipment and standards, and will make Ukraine's forces fully interoperable with NATO.
The most obvious things are for some reason most hard to notice. The country that actively, to put it mildly, shares and defends the values of the Euro-Atlantic community deserves to be part of a community. NATO is behaving cautiously as it perceives Ukraine's acceptance into the alliance as an invitation to a war, but Kiev will continue to work hard to dispel the doubts of its partners in hopes that this understandable cautiousness will not turn into standby mode. Since the war is already here, it is already here, and you should really be professing a god level of hypocrisy to still believe that matter is just between Ukraine and that modern reincarnation of Soviet Union, Russia. No, it is not. It never was, since Putin is a dictator. His version of Russia is a dictatorship, and that is exactly what an overwhelming part of Russian people accept and welcome. And this is dangerous for the whole Europe. The final vision of the results of the Vilnius NATO summit is decisions regarding Ukraine, and the mechanisms for further work will be made after meeting of the Ukraine NATO Council, a new format created specifically for Kiev, and would also be laid out in the joint declaration of the Big Seven countries, and that is a great achievement, a clear and comprehensive list of conditions Ukraine must fulfill before joining NATO is very necessary. No vague wording that allows it to be used as a pretext and an excuse for further delays. Ukraine's accession to NATO should not depend on the issue of ending the war with Ukraine, simply because instead of peace in Europe, it will, on the contrary, only prolong the war and always will provoke Russia to continue its criminal invasion, even if Putin dies tomorrow and another Tsar usurps an already usurped throne of his.
Дуже складно іноді деякі речі.
It is sometimes very difficult to explain some things to our partners because we are at war and our partners really want to help us. They help, but we still live in different conditions. We are in conditions where we have to survive and our partners want to help us live. And we have to survive in order to live. And this pushes us to fast processes, to the processes that should lead to the reformation of the security structure in the world. Unfortunately, such a high price. At the cost of our lives, we see how to fight against any aggression. We are adequate people. We understand partners help us with weapons, and this is a moment of survival, and we really need that. We understand that some are really afraid to talk about our membership in NATO now, because no one wants a world war now. And this is understandable and logical. I want everyone to understand that we are civilized and adequate people. Ukraine is fighting starting with the clear understanding that Ukraine cannot be a member of NATO while the war is going on. This is completely understandable, but the important signals that sounded today at our bilateral meetings, both with the Secretary General and with our partners, and we met with many today, is that Ukraine will be a member of NATO. And such confidence, in my opinion, after all the meetings, sounded so confidently for the first time. We will be members of NATO when there will be certain conditions. I understand by this that it will be when it is safe on our land.
While NATO is thinking about Ukraine's future in it, one thing is obvious. Whether you see it or not, whether you like it or not, whether you believe it or not, the future of NATO as such and its member countries is being decided right now by the defense forces of Ukraine on the very battlefield in its fight the Russian army. The results of the Eurobarometer survey testifies clearly the EU citizens are willing to continue to help Ukraine in its resistance to criminal Russian aggression. Well, of course, it's right that, contrary to the speculative expectations of Russian propaganda, but we on UATV are not sorry for that. Europe is not tired of supporting Ukraine. Moreover, Russian aggression is perceived as a threat and condemned by most European countries and Europeans. You, dear world, in general, are mostly on the side of Ukraine. As evidenced by those voting in the UN General Assembly, Russia is trying to oppose the facts in various ways, of course. For example, the Kremlin is manipulating with the term world's majority in terms of literal majority of the world's population, and there are no even more or less objective studies of the public opinion polls of the entire planet's attitude towards Ukraine, because it simply goes country by country. And these studies show overwhelming support of the world's nation for Ukraine. Why? Maybe the foreign policy of the Russian Federation, the policy that is hostile to the fundamental principles of global security, could be the reason. Maybe those universal international principles, which Moscow is trying to destroy, just do not work in terms with the interests of most countries of the world, and maybe that is why most of the countries of the collective West really can't tell good from bad and the aggressor from the country fighting for its freedom. 141 countries openly showed their solidarity with Ukraine on 2nd March when the UN General Assembly overwhelmingly adopted a resolution demanding that Russia immediately end its military operations in Ukraine. Governments, international organizations, businesses, celebrities and regular citizens from dozens of different countries stand strong with the Ukrainian fight for peace and freedom in Europe. The actions and statements of the global community have shown that there is no place in the civilized world for the barbaric and monstrous aggression that Russia is demonstrating now. Just by the way, there were 44 Russian cities that also joined the protests against Putin's regime warfare, but, of course, were brutally shut down by Russian police and National Guard, with more than 2,000 people arrested, including children and the elderly. So much for the Russian world, right? Every crime must have a punishment for those guilty. The security of every country, all nations, and property must only be built on this principle. This is why Ukraine, Sweden, Canada, and the United Kingdom filed a lawsuit against the Iranian authorities at the UN International Court of Justice. Tehran violated the Montreal Convention of the Safety of Civil Aviation by shooting down Ukrainian passenger plane flight PS-752 on January 8, 2020. The blame for the passenger airline catastrophe is solely on the side of the Iranian authorities, despite initial attempts to shift it all on the plane's crew. Among other violations, Tehran failed to take all possible measures that should have been taken by representatives of its armed forces in order to prevent the catastrophe. They also failed to conduct a full, transparent and impartial pre-trial investigation and trial in accordance with the international standards. Shortly after the crime against Ukrainian citizens who were passengers of this flight PS-752, Tehran became one of the sponsors of Russian terrorist attacks against the civilian population of Ukraine, deliberately and without any remorse since September 2022. Russia has launched more than 1,000 drones in Ukraine that were made in the Middle East, namely Iran. Russia unsuccessfully tried to hide the origin of the Shahed-131 and Shahed-136 drones, renaming them Jagran-1 and Jagran-2 respectively. Kyiv has repeatedly called on Tehran to stop sponsoring Russian terrorism, But in response, there were only ridiculous denials of obvious facts. Ukraine has repeatedly appealed at the bilateral level as well as in correspondence with the Office of the UN Secretary General with request to send experts to Ukraine to inspect those UAVs. Ukraine did not deserve such an openly and friendly attitude towards itself and demands satisfaction from the Iranian side. It was Henry Key on UATV English, hoping to give you the hard truth in easy enough terms on our daily wrap-up. Comment, like and subscribe. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Your opinion matters a lot. Stay safe and tune for more tomorrow.